right, hit it, Peter Parker. We're on page 48. Which paragraph? 48-2, picking up where we left off before lunch. Bring it. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nonetheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption of a starting point. Nowadays, everybody nowadays believes in the score of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate the visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the natural world that outward appearances are not inward realities. To illustrate. So real quick before we get into the illustration, he's talking about electricity. He's going to talk about the material world. I don't understand electricity. But I know there's a receptacle over there in the wall. I have absolutely no idea how it works, but I know if I take a tool that has a cord on it and shove it in the sheetrock, it ain't going to work. If I take that very same tool and I stick it into the receptacle, it's going to power up. And that's the way the human mind connects to the divine. It's the nous. It is that inability to connect with the other dimension. We seek it through prayer and meditation. It's as old as time. There is the desire of man to do that, and there is a process. So Bill's going through, he's talking to the agnostic, and he's bringing him to a place where he can witness through science. The prosthetic steel grinder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speeds. These tiny bodies governed by precise laws, and they're laws that hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us we have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is to suggest that underneath all of material world and life, as we see it, there is an all-powerful and guiding creative intelligence. We call that the Logos, the spirit of the universe, the Word of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and He was with God. And this is what in Greek is called the Logos. It is the divine reason. It is the thoughts of God. It is the creation of God. It is all things that come from God. So I love the way Bill uses that multiple times throughout the book to take people to an understanding that they may not otherwise approach. See, we can see him in the evidence of creation. Remember where we started in the beginning, and I read that piece in the preface that talked about William Paley being the author of a book called The Evidence of Christianity, which is quoted in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We hear it all the time. They've now moved it to page 156, but there's one principle which bars against all information, which proof against all argument, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That is contempt prior to investigation. It was credited to Herbert Spencer, but it was really written by a guy named William Paley, who wrote a book called The Evidence of Christianity. And it was about the material world, and that was the kind of things that the old boys were reading back then. And so here we are, we're coming to that point, and it says, instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, which is what God tells us we are. We are the spearhead. We have dominion. But we walk away from that. This is His plan. We agnostics and atheists choose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? Now he's going to come to the point of the believers. We who have traveled this dubious path, who have gone from being agnostic to believers, beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. I said earlier that we have these prejudices about organized religion. They're pretty common. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of these various faiths, these bodies of believers, may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions of people. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Isn't that interesting? So now Bill's going to talking about churchmen and going back to their churches and talking about the Logos. And now he's saying that people of faith, people that are seeking God, have a very logical understanding. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception. So the agnostic, Bill's now saying, hey, your understanding of just science gives you no reasonable conception of how God works. Whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs. I did that. And practices when we might have observed that many spiritual-minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds are demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. Wow. Spiritually minded. Having cultivated a relationship with our Heavenly Father is one definition. Being preoccupied with God's thoughts is another. That preoccupation we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact, that becomes a preoccupation. When you're connected to Him, you want to think about Him. It's the 11th step. It's the conscious contact. When we get to the 11th step, he's going to define it in another way. We'll be there shortly. Instead of looking at the human defects of those people and sometimes use their own shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation, we talked of intolerance while we talked of tolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of the trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In our personal stories, there we go again, the original stories, the original witness, the stories that were in the big book when first printed, not those that are there today, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives a power greater than himself. And when you read those old stories, they talk a lot about reading the Bible, they talk a lot about Jesus, they talk a lot about how they uncovered God's plan for their life. Seems to make little difference. Experience has taught them that these matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. How a man comes, how he comes to faith, how he comes to believe. Remember, I just throw seeds. You're going to take some of this, it's going to hit good soil, you're going to grab it, you're going to run with it. It'll become part of the direction that you go. Other parts are just going to bounce right off. Each man's walk is his own. That's part of the beauty of what the old timers did. They are questions for each individual to settle himself. Got to stop and clean my glasses, sorry. Can't read. Come on. There we go. One proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agree. Every one of them gained access to and believes in the power greater than himself. This power, both places it's capitalized, in each of us, in each case, accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As the celebrated American statement put it, let's look at the record. Now I want you to notice when they talk about the power, it talks about the power with a capital P, doesn't have the word higher in front of it. That's usually how Bill puts that. Like I said in the beginning, he uses the higher power a couple of different times, and one of them is with the dictates, and the other one he simply says a higher power. But normally he talks about a power, but we convert that a little bit in modern times. Here are 100 men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declared that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, there's one of them, to take a certain attitude towards that power, to do the certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and their thinking. By the testimony of their mouths and the blood of the Lamb, we are changed. Back to Revelation 6, right? So they did these things. They read. They talked. We went through all the things that Bill did. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new, powerful peace and happiness and sense of direction flowed into them. Going back to page 25, the Creator has entered into our heart. Once the Creator enters in, the connection is made, the flow can begin. Once we're connected, it comes. This happens soon after they wholeheartedly meet a few simple requirements. Now, again, you think that's the steps, but what he's talking about is to seek God and help others. The basis of the program goes very back to simple things. Dr. Bob said it's about love and service, his last speech. He said, don't louse this thing up with Freudian concepts. It's real simple. We know what love is, and we know what service is. This thing is about love and service. And guard against the erring member, your tongue. Watch what you speak over people. And where does he get that? Love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbors yourself. The greatest command. Dr. Bob says it a little differently, saying the same thing, which goes out, it's a theme throughout the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the way the old-timers talked. They took biblical language and they converted it into modern language, just like we're doing here today, walking through it and disclosing it. You know, there's a couple of things that God cannot do that are important. Actually, one. The Bible says that God cannot lie. And if he cannot lie, everything he says about himself is therefore true. How good is that? I can rely absolutely on anything that he says about himself. And where does he say those things about himself? In his word. When I read his word, I'm taking in his truth. As I take in his truth, I can push that truth back out. The old-timers knew that. But they also knew that, you know, we're not Pharisees and Sadducees and educated in the ways of, you know, the Old Testament, you know, and the laws and all that. We're just men on a journey now, walking in the New Testament. We're walking under grace. We're walking under his authority and what he gave us by the work that he did. And other men who know the road that we've journeyed can say, wow, that guy must have something to give. I know who he was. He told me who he was. He told me how he lived. Only the Spirit can teach us. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they will show the underlying reasons why they were making a heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. When 100 people are able to say, and here it comes, that the consciousness of the presence of God, the consciousness of the presence of God is the most important fact of their lives. That is not put your program first. That is the consciousness of the presence of God. So we connect, the Creator enters into our heart, and then we work for that conscious connection so that when temptation comes, we automatically receive inspiration. Get away from him. He's mine. And off we go. Come on now. Somebody get excited. Bring it. Here we go. They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than all the millennia that went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men of those days was equal to the best of ours today. Boy, I think the antediluvians, the people before the flood, they were probably smarter and had technologies that we couldn't even imagine. You know, you look at where man's gone in just the last couple hundred years since the Industrial Revolution versus all the painful development along through time. And you think, my Lord, if they had 3,000 years or so before the flood, what could those guys have come up with? What did they really have? What did they really know? We don't know. And I think it's the same way when we look at the material world. We look at all this stuff around us, electricity and all these different things that the ancients didn't have, and progress was slow, but they knew something that we didn't. They focused more on the spiritual realm. So here we go. This world of ours, almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us the intellect of man of those days, here we are, the spirit of the modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were flattered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. That meaning that they were restrained, that our beliefs were different. They looked at the world through a completely different lens. And you can see just in what's happened over the last 10 years as technology has leapfrogged, and what their suggestion is going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years as technology really gains intelligence. I was watching TV this morning, they were talking about an AI program that acts as a psychiatrist to help people with their marital problems. You give it a question, and it goes and it does a big AI thing, and it spits something out. Where will man be with his intellect and his intelligence and his systems and his computers, and how selfish and narcissistic and full of ourselves will we be in another 20 years? Wow. How far and how easy will it be to forget about the things of the Spirit? Won't help the real alcoholic. Some of us contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others like them came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. The world is flat, don't you know? We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the Spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Here's my question. When you look at that and it talks about the things of the Spirit and whether we're reasonable or not, and the basis for the realm of the Spirit and what the ancients believed and what's going on today, how could there be so much precise, mutable law with no intelligence? Going back to what Bill said. There has to be something behind it all. Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print the accounts of the Wright Brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac? So as technology changes, we're like, that can't even work. Are you kidding me? We just doubt it. If it's not what we know, it's not what we're currently believing, there's a resistance. And it's no different when people start to walk towards the Spirit. There's a certain amount of resistance that their intellect has against something new, something different. So when we are sharing what we have come to believe, does a man need to come to believe that instantaneously in that moment? I think not. I think every man comes to his own understanding, because God is perfectly capable of having 7 billion instantaneous, simultaneous relationships with each one of his people on this earth. And they are where they should be and where they're walking. And that's hard to believe if something not so good is going on in your life. Trying to explain the unexplainable. Why did they die and I didn't? What do I have to give? Why did God keep me here? We have those questions. And I say, when we get to the vision for you in the very last chapter, there's 3 kinds of vision: insight, foresight, and hindsight. What we're after here is insight. If I'm looking towards tomorrow, I'm not living in today. If I'm looking in the rearview mirror at all my problems, everything that occurred, there's no freedom. Either one of those 2 things will keep me in bondage. So as I look forward and I try to move forward, I want to keep myself in that presence. Where am I, guys? 51:2. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased about and unreasonable about the realm of the Spirit? Last sentence, thank you. Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of air was almost an old story, and airplanes travel was in full swing. Now think about it. This is a time when airplane flight was just beginning. We'll hop on airplanes and go around the world like it's nothing today. So the material world is moving extremely fast, but the realm of the spirit is ever fixed. God's not changing. He's the same today, tomorrow, as he was yesterday. He'll always be the same. His truth will always be the same. We can always anchor into it, and he'll always give us more of what we need. So it's hard for the scientific mind to understand that. How could it be unchanging when everything is changing? And when you read his word, it doesn't change. And you read it and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what these men were doing. They were digging, they were helping, they were trying to move their way through. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of thinking, open-mindedness. See, I need to have my mind open to other people's concepts and things. It's not my business. Liberated thinking is where we don't live in a box. It has to be this way. You can watch the Democrats and the Republicans go at it every day. They're so polarized now, and that's not the way things were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Yet we got ourselves in these little boxes. It's polarizing. Liberated thinking is the opposite. I don't have to believe as you believe, but you have the right to believe any way that you like. I'll just share with you what I do. Show Longshoreman, a Sunday supplement describing the proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he'll say, I bet they do it. Now we're going to Mars. Your TV's hooked up to a satellite out there flying around. It's like the material world keeps getting more and more advanced, and as it does, it makes it harder and harder for us to ground ourselves back in truth. I bet they do. Now watch this. Our beliefs are like snake skins. You might want to write that in the margin. Here's what he's going to say about that. Is not our age characterized by the ease by which we discard old ideas for new? You see, your beliefs will constantly change and grow. The truth is the truth, and it is unchanging, but the way I view it will change. I believe one thing today, and as I grow, I shed that skin and get a new one. A believer is constantly growing. And anything that isn't growing is dying. So don't be discouraged if what you believed yesterday is changing today. Yesterday was perfect exactly as it was, and today will be even better. By the complete readiness by which we throw away the theory or gadget which doesn't work for something new that does. That's why our beliefs will change. But you'll always anchor it back into the truth. We have asked ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change the point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional nature. We were prey to misery, depression. We couldn't make a living. We had the feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be real help to other people. Was not a basic solution to these bedevilments more important than whether we should see a newsreel of lunar flight? Of course it was. So Bill's back deep into the problem again. He's back into the narcissistic nature of who we are. So he brings us up, and then problem, solution. And he's going to come in, and he's going to reintroduce again the spirit of the universe, because the basic bedevilments are holding on to the old nature. The dog returns to eat his own vomit. I like that part of my old life. There were things that I liked, that I enjoyed, even though I know they're not good for me. I still want to do them. I just don't want to drink. Don't try taking away my lust, my greed, my envy, my sloth, my anger. I like those. There's comfort in those things. Lord, don't you know? Yet those are the things that we give up in the seventh step. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. Take from me every single defect of character. Bill at the kitchen table talks about his sins. He asked God to take away his sin nature. So here we go. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon, there it is again, the spirit of the universe, the Logos, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas didn't work, but the God idea did. The Wright Brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a flying machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, the belief that we can do it, nothing could have happened. It starts with belief. I can do this, Lord. I'm all in. Take me, I am yours. I believe with every bit of my being. I am now willing that you should have all of me. I offer myself to thee, to have with me and do with me as you see fit. Take away my difficulties so that my victory over them will bear usefulness to those I would help. Of your power and of your love and your way of life, may I do thy will always. 3rd and 7th step prayers. If you're not doing some version of that every day in your life, give it a shot. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea of self-sufficiency. That's the bedevilment. It talks about the bedevilments, and there it is. It's self-sufficiency. I got this. I can do it. Pride, in all forms, is selfishness. Would solve our problems. When others showed that the God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted that Wright would never fly. Logic is great stuff. We like it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, the mind, the soul, the ability to use our will freely as he gave it to us, as it happened, as he made sure that we had the choice to choose or reject him, which is really the only thing our will is for. Its ultimate design is to choose God or reject God. And absent an active choice, it's a rejection. Wow. Here we go. 3 minutes. The evidence of our senses and to draw conclusions. This is one of man's magnificent attributes. So there it is. It's the soul, the mind, the ability to draw conclusions and act on them. The ability to think and reason, the gift that God gave man separately. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. That's the decision point the agnostic comes to. When we became alcoholic, crushed by self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition, and here it is. This is the question, that God is either everything or he is nothing. It's a decision point for the new guy. If at this point you can't make that decision, I think I make a little suggestion that you throw the book away or start over, right? Because it says he is all or nothing. What is your choice to be? He either is or he isn't. We're going to take a break right there, and we're going to take a couple of minutes. And if you want to talk during the timeout, have it.